Successful Bookkeepers. Thanks so much for joining me today. So often, when we think about growing and transforming a business, our minds go to things like landing new clients, scaling, streamlining processes, marketing. All of those things, of course, are incredibly important when growing and expanding your business. But we tend to overlook one critical factor that in the long term is going to slow your growth and limit your ability to produce results. And that is your mindset. So today, I want to share with you some tools and new ideas to set yourself up for success and to get your mindset ready for whatever that next level of growth is in your business. My name's Erin Daiber. Again, I want to welcome you and thank you for joining me. I am the founder of Well Balanced Accountants, and a number of my credentials and experiences are up there on the screen for you. But what I really want you to know is that I have sat in your seat. I was an accountant. I worked in this profession. And what I learned early on was that it wasn't the numbers that was exciting me and getting me out of bed in the morning, but it was the people who work in this profession that I love and adore. And so as my career sort of progressed and I was doing that self-exploration and trying to figure out what is the impact and the contribution that I want to make to this profession, I ultimately came back to the people. That's where I wanted to have the biggest impact. And so today, in my current role as a coach and consultant, I get to work with bookkeepers, accountants, accounting firm leaders all over the country who are ready for that next level in their leadership and their business, who are navigating the everyday challenges of doing so, navigating business life and navigating growth and development. And it is just absolutely such a joy and a pleasure. So looking forward to sharing more about that with you today and getting you ready for your next level. I'm going to start with a story. This actually happened recently. I was in a conversation with a leader in an accounting organization. And like a number of organizations today, they are struggling with retention. They have lost a number of people over the last few years, but recently it's become even more significant. Now, this is happening across the world in all sorts of professions, but it's really impacting the accounting profession, as you can imagine. There's also a lot of factors that go into retention, and it's not an easy fix, though I wish it was. So I'm speaking to these firm leaders and they're telling me about their challenges. They're also telling me about the things that they've implemented. And to their credit, they've been trying a lot of different things to make it work. But nothing seems to really be making a difference. So start to learn more about the situation, learn more about the organization. And then I begin telling them a bit about my process and how I might help them to solve their retention challenges and begin that transformative process. When we think about things like retention, it really does require transformation in order to have significantly different results. So in having this conversation, I said to them, look, transformation is not easy. There are going to be days when this sounds like the worst idea, when you just don't feel like doing these things anymore. Are you up for the challenge? They said, yes. And then I said, the other thing you'll discover in this process is that not everyone and not everything that you used to do are going to be what you need going forward. So when we think about people, are you willing to let people go? Now, they've hired me or they've inquired with me about helping them with retention. So you can imagine how shocked they are when one of my first questions is, are you willing to let people go? The reality is some of those people aren't going to be ready for this next level. Once we've transformed the culture and transformed the business, they're not going to be up for it. They're not going to be a good fit anymore. So then I asked these leaders, I said, when I say, are you willing to let people go that are no longer a good fit and aren't a good fit for your next level? Do you know who I'm talking about? And they all looked at each other in the room and they shook their heads and they said, yeah, we know who you're talking about. Now, I don't know who they're talking about. I still don't, but they knew. They knew that there are certain people in their organization who aren't going to serve them as they move forward. Now, similarly, if I showed you this picture of 3 oranges and I said, which one of these needs to go? Which one of these 3 oranges is causing an issue or holding you back or is going to spoil the bunch? You know the answer to that too. It's pretty obvious. It's clear. This one isn't going to help us to get to the next level. In fact, I've got to get rid of it so that the other oranges in the bunch can thrive. Sometimes in order to get to the next level, we have to let go of things, habits, and possibly people who are no longer serving you. Now, I've used the word transformation a couple of times already, so I wanted to just pause here and give you my definition and the distinction between change and transformation. So a change happens all the time. This is incremental. The key here, though, is that change happens inside of what we already know. It doesn't require any sort of significant shift in our belief system. It tends to be inside of the same context or view of the world, view of what is and what so, sometimes even inside of the same conversation. Now, transformation, on the other hand, is much more radical. And as a result, it leaps you forward. It's not an incremental change, but in fact, from one moment to the next, things are completely different and likely never to go back to the way they were before. Now, the thing with transformation is that this exists outside of what you already know. So it can be a little bit scary. It does require you to step out of your comfort zone. I always say it requires a breakdown of our current beliefs of what so or what is in order to gain access to that next level of power, possibility, and ultimately an entirely new future. So that's what I mean when we talk about transformation. Any major change that you take on in your business, like changing your processes to retain your staff, or growing and scaling the business, that is a transformation. True change in that way, true growth is going to require a transformation. Now, the thing that's going to ultimately start holding you back from that growth and what you desire in your business is you. Eventually, we all reach that bottleneck, that place where the tools and the skills that we used before are no longer working. They're not equipped for this next level. They worked to get us here and we're grateful, but they're not going to get us to the next level. Just like in my example, when I said, who are you going to have to let go? They knew exactly who we're talking about. And the oranges, we know exactly what's not serving us to have us get to that next level. So regardless of where you're at in your business today, if you're just starting out, maybe you haven't reached this point yet, but that's great. Now we're being proactive. I'm letting you know what to look out for. Maybe you really feel like you're in this right now where you're stuck. You're trying the things you used to do, but you're not getting the results at the same level. The results are harder to come by. Maybe you've just chalked it up to being tired or burned out or being older today than you were when you started your business. But just like we want to keep our technical skills at the top level, and we want to keep those growing and developing, likewise, we need to continue to develop and grow our mindset so that we don't become that bottleneck in the business. So imagine again that image of the 2 healthy oranges and the 1 yucky one. We were very clear about which one of those is not going to serve us going forward. I shared both of those examples because just like those examples, with your mindset, I think you know exactly what mindset or belief you currently hold that is ultimately holding you back. The mindset or belief that is not going to get you to the next level. So I want you to think about that for a moment. I want you to share it in the chat. And even though this session is pre-recorded, I'm going to be here with you live, engaging with you in the chat. So I want to see what that mindset, what that belief is. Same, just along that line, drop your questions in there too as we go along. I'd love to answer them. So what is the mindset, the belief, the habit even that you believe may be holding you back or that you could see becoming that bottleneck in the future? Now, if I was going to answer that question for you today about my business and where I'm at in my growth curve, I would say the mindsets I need to let go of and that I'm working through currently are this idea that there's always tomorrow. If I don't get to it today, I can do it tomorrow. Lack of urgency around certain tasks, certain things. Doubting myself in pricing or value conversations. Those are always a little bit sticky for me. And I notice a tendency to want to discount my services, or I question myself. I feel a little scared when I think about what I'm going to charge somebody. And the other mindset that I think is potentially holding me back is still this idea that follow-up is somehow pushy or salesy or not of service. And so that's what I'm navigating. So I'm right here with you navigating through this. Now, there's a few other examples that I've thrown up here that I think will resonate with you. And I've navigated through many of these over the course of running this organization. So you might have mindsets or beliefs like these, that anything less than perfect is unacceptable, or I'm not feeling ready to take on fill in the blank. I'm not ready to take on niching. I'm not ready to take on a price increase. I'm not ready to take on that next big client, the ideal client. So I'm going to keep taking on these little baby clients that are comfortable, but really require a lot of time and attention and handholding. I can't say no to clients or client requests. Client work is the most important. I can't set boundaries because I don't honor my time or my appointments with myself. Those are some examples. Now, don't let me limit you. You may have something different than what is included up here on the screen. Let's just pick at a few of these for a second. This idea that I'm not ready, I'm not feeling ready to take on whatever it is, whatever that task is, suggests that there is some fantasy time in the future when you will feel ready. And the reality is probably not. We need to get into the habit of being in action even when you're not ready. That idea of not ready is based in fear. We're going to talk a lot more about that. Setting boundaries. If you feel like you can't set boundaries because people won't like it, my clients won't like it, I have to be of service. I'm in the client service business. This is my job to do these things for my clients. Maybe it's a conversation about, I don't deserve to set boundaries. I don't deserve balance. I have to work hard. We need to explore more around where these mindsets came from. Let's do that now. The interesting thing about this is that you learned these behaviors and developed these belief systems long ago, probably when you were this little guy's age. These beliefs and behaviors have been ingrained in you for a very long time. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't change them. It does mean that it's not going to change overnight. So just know that going in, but let's explore this a little bit further. I want to take that example of setting boundaries because frankly, I've never met an accountant or a bookkeeper who is in business for themselves that didn't struggle in some way with setting boundaries, especially with clients. So I want you to think back about your mindset while I go through this example, the mindset or the belief or the habit that's holding you back. I'm going to use the example of boundaries, but keep looking for yourself to see what you can pick up on in this example. So I want you to think back about that mindset, about that belief system, and try to tie it back to an early lesson that is maybe informing those choices or those belief systems today. Where did this come from? Now, just assume that you learned it right around this guy's age. You might have heard lessons like, for instance, if you struggle with boundaries, you may have heard lessons like you have to work hard. Taking time for yourself is selfish. You might have heard, maybe there was a family conversation about in life, there's winners and losers, and you better be a winner. We are winners in this family. Later on in life, you may have heard stories, or maybe somebody said something to you like, the customer is always right. Without happy customers, your business will fail. So try to tie your current mindset and belief system back to an early lesson. This does a few things. It helps us to have some compassion for it. Wow, okay, I was just a little guy. I was just a little girl at the time, and that's what I picked up on, and now I've taken that and it's turned into what it is today. So we don't have to make ourselves wrong about it. We just hold ourselves with compassion and have some understanding about where this came from. Now, it's great to have an understanding of where this came from. We might also be very present to the idea that this isn't helping me anymore. So why do we keep doing it? Why does this continue, even though it may not really be helping us? We've maybe experienced the ways that it's not helping us anymore. And that's because we get something out of it. So again, let's follow along with this lack of boundaries, not being willing to set boundaries. Maybe the early story I got was you've got to work hard and you've got to be a winner. And in order to be successful, it requires hard work. And so now I'm in business for myself. I'm working really hard. And I think that the way to work hard and get results is to, be of service to my clients. And that when they ask me for things that, even if it doesn't really work for me, but that's part of working hard. And so inside of that story I have, I'm going to keep working hard for my clients all the time. And as that grows and expands, it gets worse and worse. Now, why do I keep doing that? What is the payoff that I get from doing that? We don't do anything as human beings without getting something out of it. Now, you might be thinking, there's no payoff. I don't get anything good out of that. I just have to work all the time and it's brutal and I have no balance. But the reality is we do get something out of it. You either get to avoid something uncomfortable or you get a momentary sense of gratification and, oh, yes, accomplished that. That sounds great. So what are you getting to avoid? So if I'm not setting boundaries, I'm likely avoiding confrontation, maybe potentially difficult conversations with clients where I have to reset the rules. I'm also avoiding having to hold myself accountable. If I'm going to start holding other people accountable to those boundaries, that means I have to hold myself accountable. Maybe I don't feel confident in my own ability to do that. Maybe not setting these boundaries allows me to be so busy and so chaotic in my day-to-day that I don't have to do the other harder things. I get to avoid other tasks, other things that, even though they might help me and be more productive, they're not as easy for me or not as comfortable. So think about, what is that payoff? What is it that you get to avoid by continuing on in this pattern? Share it in the chat, just in case any of our fellow participants here today are struggling. I want you to share in the chat so that maybe we can spark ideas for others. So you get a payoff. You either get to avoid something uncomfortable or feel good in the moment temporarily, but it comes at a cost. You're exhausted. The results are getting harder and harder to come by. Maybe you're starting to resent your business and resent your clients. You have to make sacrifices to stay in this mode, on this hamster wheel. It's chaos all the time. If you have a team, likely your team isn't developing. Maybe they're stagnating, their skills aren't growing, and so they're getting frustrated. Maybe they're thinking about leaving and finding another organization to work with. Those are some of the business costs, but I would assert that that comes with a high emotional cost as well. So let's walk through this as a cycle. Some of you might think better or visualize things in more of a cycle. So let's walk through this, keeping with the boundaries example. So I've got this underlying belief. Maybe my belief is I don't deserve balance, or I haven't earned the right, I'm not successful enough yet to have earned the right to set boundaries with clients. I still have to work hard. I've got to be proving my worth and my value. So that's the underlying belief that I hold. That is determining my behavior. So my behavior might look like not setting boundaries, saying yes to things, even though they don't work for me, agreeing to appointments outside of my normal business hours, working on vacation, working crazy hours, promising things right away, even though you've been waiting on this client for months. They've ghosted you for months, and then they show up and you're like, yes, sure thing, right away, anything you need. Sound familiar? So all of these behaviors, however this shows up for you, this is based in fear. You can hear it, right? I'm afraid my client's going to leave. I'm afraid of ramifications, right? I'm afraid to disappoint someone. This is based in fear, but we get the payoff, like we just talked about a moment ago. I'm getting to avoid difficult conversations. I avoid holding people accountable. I get to stay busy as a strategy to avoid the other uncomfortable or challenging things I should really be doing in my business. Here's another payoff. I get to keep playing this small game of doing things, doing client work, doing the debits and credits, that small game that I know I can win at. But what I don't have to do is take on that big game, that next level, taking on that next level client or moving and developing my skills to the next level. That's a payoff too. So we get this payoff, and what we end up with is this actual self versus our ideal self. What I mean by that is you see yourself operating in this way, but you also know there's that little voice in the background that says, gosh, I think I could, I could be so much more. I could do so much more. We're not fooling ourselves, right? We can't lie to ourselves. We know that there is that next level available. So this creates tension. This is that high emotional cost. This might be where you start beating yourself up a little bit, feel like being down on yourself. And then here's what happens. There are results split. There's the results that we think we get, and then there's the results or the impact that we actually get. So for example, by not setting boundaries and doing all these things for clients, twisting myself into a pretzel to make everyone happy, I think I'm going to get happy customers. I'm going to feel satisfied. I'm going to get that gratification of getting things done, and I'm going to feel great. What I actually get is results that are harder and harder to come by: exhaustion, no balance, resentment, maybe even clients who aren't happy because, in fact, you haven't set expectations, or you've set expectations that were so unmeetable that then, so I maybe set an expectation. Sure, I'll get that to you right away by the end of the day. But that was never realistic. You weren't going to be able to do that. So you missed that deadline. What you actually get is a disappointed client, even though what you were doing was designed to make that client happy. Have you seen that play out? Great. That's the cost, right? Now it's costing you. Hey, I'm actually not getting the results that I want. And so what we do is, instead of shifting our belief system, we go to, well, I guess I have to work harder or faster or stronger or, longer hours or more days. We go back to that old way of doing things that has gotten us results in the past. And that just reinforces the story, and we're back in this cycle. So do you see this happening for yourself? Drop a little yes in the chat, or that's me. Let people know they're not alone here. Now let's explore how this impacts your business. We like to convince ourselves, again, that dedicating time and energy to things like our mindsets isn't as important as the client work, or isn't as critical, and it's often the thing that gets pushed to the side. But let's try to tie this directly to your bottom line. So let's take a real life example. We start here at the top of this triangle. Let's explore if this is showing up in your business on a day-to-day. We've got a problem or a threat, maybe an angry client email, and they say, "Dear Successful Bookkeeper, where is my stuff? I've been waiting for months. I haven't seen my monthly, reconciliations. Where is it? This is getting ridiculous," right? An angry, nasty gram email. I think we've all gotten them at some point. Immediately, that strikes fear inside of you, right? That's going to strike fear inside of anybody. Oh gosh, have I disappointed somebody? They're mad at me. Are they going to fire me? And so what do? We leap into action. We quickly check, what's the status of this? Is it complete? Where are we? If it's not complete, it's not ready to go, we probably drop everything and dive into getting their reconciliations and their deliverables ready to go. We send it off. They're happy. Whew, crisis averted. And then we feel good for a moment until the next problem, the next fire drill happens. So over time, your results are going to look something like this. little bit up and down, but we're generally staying within a pretty narrow range of results. We're never going to let anything get so bad or so low that, things are falling off, right? We're going to jump back into action. And then we're going to feel good for a moment when we're up at the top, and then things will slide, and then we'll say, uh-oh, better get back into action. And so we're on this pattern over time. Your results are going to be limited in this way. But imagine, what if there was a different way to go about this? What if there was a different approach to running your business that would allow you to have more balance, where you could be more decisive in the moment? Maybe you could, not struggle so much with making decisions, but just be clear. This is what needs to happen. This is how we need to handle it. Maybe you could have those open conversations with your clients or your team, be able to create those next level results. Maybe you weren't so busy that you could actually see the big picture, see where we're headed, and make those strategic decisions. What would shift in your business or your life? So here's the other way. Instead of operating with that other triangle where at the top was problems and threats, now we have purpose and vision. So you've got a clear purpose for why your organization exists, why you're here, what your vision is for the future. And hopefully that is juicy enough and exciting enough and enticing enough for you that you're in fact passionate about it. That as you read it and connect with that vision and imagine it being a reality, you're excited. And that inspires you to take action, making those changes in your business, pursuing transformation in yourself or in your processes or in the organization. And as you take those actions, you get closer and closer to that vision and that purpose becoming a reality, actually experiencing it for yourself, which makes you even more excited, which has you ready to take the next action. So you can hear this is building on itself, right? We're getting closer and closer to that vision every step we take. So over time, your results are going to have that upward trajectory. Now, we'll still have ups and downs. You're still going to have good days and bad days. Of course, we all do. But it's really about moving in the right direction as opposed to stagnating or staying inside of that really narrow level of results. So step number one in moving through this is if you don't have a purpose or a vision that excites you and gets you out of bed in the morning and just lights you up, start there. Write that vision out. Understand and define why your business exists. Why did you start this thing in the first place? Who do you serve? What's your bigger purpose? What will your life be like when this business is running the way that you want it to run? Will you be on vacation, working remote, growing a team? There's so many possibilities, but you have to write what is exciting for you. And then read it daily. I still read my purpose and vision and mission every single day before I start my day, before I do a single thing to move my business forward. So start there. It's an easy step, but it's critical. Without this, you're going to be very tempted by the fire drills and the problems and the threats and operating away from fear. We need something to pull us forward. And this purpose and vision is going to do just that. Now let's talk about shifting the mindset. Some old mindsets are up here on the screen, maybe perfectionist tendencies, this idea that I haven't earned or haven't, justified this next level for myself yet. I'm not ready yet. Maybe you've got a weird relationship with sales being pushy or slimy, just like I do. I've struggled with that my whole life as a business owner. Boundaries are hard. We've talked about that a lot today. Now, we want to replace those mindsets with something else. So here are some examples. Maybe if you fall into that category of not ready yet, or I haven't earned it, maybe it's about being in an exploration or an experiment of what's possible. I'm enough. Truly believing that your value doesn't come from the productivity or come from the work that you do, but that you're enough by yourself. Not doing anything else, it's enough. From a sales perspective, discovering who I'm meant to work with has been a shift that helped me so much in having these conversations. It's no longer a sales conversation. It's not about me pitching them on something. It's really just a connection and a conversation. And we're in the discovery process. Am I the guide that will help take you to the next level? And is this the business owner? Is this the person that is the best fit for me and who's going to get the most out of the services that I offer? It's just a shift in the relationship to those conversations. It has freed up so much. Coming from service to clients. Now, be careful with this one because sometimes this turns into, okay, I am being of service by working on Saturdays and working late nights and things like that. But maybe even in a sales conversation to think about, how can I be of service? You know, maybe offering additional services to clients. You could take that and feel like, ugh, that feels icky. It feels salesy because they're going to have to pay me more for those services. But if I'm really thinking about what's going to help this business, my client, get to the next level, that's an example of coming from service. When I win, my clients win. Honoring my schedule is a path to liberation. I love these. These are great around that conversation of setting boundaries. So what I want you to notice here, again, this is not an exclusive list. Feel free to come up with your own. Please drop your new proposed mindsets in the chat. I would love, love, love to see them. But what I want you to notice here in these examples is that none of the new mindsets are the opposite of the old one. For example, if you fall into that category of I'm not ready, or I feel like I'm not ready yet, my new mindset is not I'm ready, because that is inside of the old context, inside of the old conversation, that there is such a thing as ready or not ready. That's a context. That's a lens through which we view life. The way we see, what's so. But remember, transformation exists in a context outside of what we already know. It's not in the old context. That's going to get you maybe incremental change. We're looking for transformation, radical, leaping you forward. So just notice if you kind of went to, oh, I'm not ready, or I'm a perfectionist, so now I don't have to be a perfectionist. That's inside of the old conversation. Just a little gut check for you. Now, shifting your mindset is a practice. As we said, the old mindset is deeply ingrained. So this will be a practice. Write it down, have it on a Post-it note so you can see it. I love this exercise I'm going to share with you next. So if you don't have paper in front of you, make sure you grab some. And I want you to take time, either right now or after today's session, to think about the 3 habits, mindsets, beliefs, maybe actions. Maybe you see some behaviors that you do as a result of these old mindsets. And I want you to list the 3 key habits, mindsets, or beliefs or actions that you are going to stop doing that will support getting to your next level, support your growth. So for example, mine at one point were that I had to let go of this idea, this belief that following up was pushy. I had to stop putting off and neglecting the time that I had in my calendar dedicated to marketing. That was a behavior I needed to stop doing. And in other words, I needed to really honor that time in my calendar. And I had to stop neglecting taking care of myself. I would often work even when I wasn't really in the right frame of mind, when really what I needed to do was have a little break, maybe a walk, and then come back with fresh eyes. So those were examples of habits, mindsets, beliefs that I needed to stop doing. Now, once you've got your 3 that you're going to stop doing, we want to replace that with 3 new habits, mindsets, beliefs, new actions that you will start doing that's going to support your growth at that next level. So perhaps this means that I need to start setting boundaries with clients. An example could be maybe you stop saying yes to client requests in the moment. Stop saying, oh, sure, I'll get that to you right away. And instead get in the practice of saying, let me take a look at the status of this. I'll get back to you within the next day or 2. And then maybe you even take it further and say, I can get this deliverable to you by X date, right? By 5 days from now. If your habit was to say, I can get it to you tomorrow, just start giving yourself 2 or 3 days, a little bit of extra time so that you don't feel the pressure. That's just an example of something to stop doing and start doing. So feel free to share some of your ideas in the chat and provide some inspiration to folks, but this is incredibly helpful. Have these things posted. Again, we've got to be able to see them in your space as a reminder of what you've committed to and what you're going to take on for that next level. Now, remember, again, this is a practice. So imagine all of these years you've been going to the gym and you've only been lifting weights with your right arm. You're incredibly strong. That is incredibly easy for you to lift weights with your right arm. Just like these old habits and old mindsets are incredibly easy. They're your default. But now, after all these years of neglecting your left arm, I'm asking you to pick up that weight with your left arm. It's going to be challenging. It's not going to be the easiest thing. It's going to take time to develop that left arm, this new habit, this new belief system, up to the level that your other side was. And eventually we want this to overtake, right? We want this to become the new habit where that old one just slowly fades into the background and is no longer running the show. My old habits and beliefs are still back there to a certain extent. They still pop up every once in a while, but for the most part, we're moving forward powerfully, and they don't get in the way of the behaviors and the actions that I take on a daily basis. So just have some compassion for yourself in this process. It is a practice. I've thrown a lot at you today in a very short period of time. This transformation that you're taking on in your business and the transformation of your mindset and your belief systems, that doesn't happen overnight. And it's not always an easy process. If it were easy to take on this type of transformation in your business and your life, everybody out there who wanted to would have a successful business. They have no complaints, no unmet goals, no frustrations. And that is just simply not the case. Now, if you're sitting here thinking, this is exactly what my business needs. I know I need to transform my mindset, let go of those old habits and beliefs and take on that next level. But gosh, I don't know if I'm reliable to do that. I'm not exactly sure what my business, what the specifics are that I need to take on in my business for my unique situation. That's exactly why I offer these complimentary sessions where we can continue this conversation. What I know is that you come to summits and to events like this, and you leave filled up with possibilities and new ideas and things you want to implement, changes or transformations you want to take on. And as soon as you get back into the day-to-day, that swing of things, the momentum of everyday life, it just sort of carries you away. You get wrapped up in emails and the old habits and putting out fires. And before you know it, those possibilities and those changes and the opportunities that you saw for yourself have floated so far into the background, and then they just never happen. I don't want that to happen to you today. The opportunity in these calls is for us to spend some time getting to know one another. I get to learn more about the specific challenges and the specific mindsets or beliefs that may be holding you back, and support you in taking those next steps to move that forward, to understand what your new mindset would be, or maybe even to navigate what is the old mindset and what should the new one be. Whatever that next step is for you that you need support on, that is what we spend time on these calls. They're not a sales pitch, although if you want to learn more about working with me and how having some additional support in the form of a coach could help, we can always have that conversation. But my intention with this is simply to help you take what you've learned today, any of the new awarenesses or ideas or possibilities, and to have a plan to implement them in your business. That is my ultimate commitment. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. And I want to acknowledge you for being one of the few business owners who is willing to be in this conversation, who is interested in exploring and navigating the inner side of running a business. That is the hard part. It's not the tactical side that we struggle with, it's that internal experience that we have. So by doing that, by being open to this conversation, and simply by being here today, you have set yourself ahead of the pack. I'd love to follow along in your journey and stay connected and be here as a resource for you in any way that I can. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.